Hey guys, it's 99 yottahertz here, and today I want to talk about the Samsung Galaxy S4 as well as its main competitors, HTC, and Sony, and last but not least, Apple. Apple is probably one of the most important ones we're going to be talking today, and we might be able to get into the other side of the world's phones, China. Now, we won't be going so in depth on it in this video, but the main purpose of this video is to touch on the Samsung Galaxy S4. So let's get straight to the point and go to the specs of the Galaxy S4. And I always use GSM Arena for all my specs because it's almost always accurate. And it's especially helpful for Apple products because you can actually search up the full specs. Here, for example, the iPhone 5, you wouldn't be able to figure out all of this stuff on Apple's site. Sure, you can find some of it, but you wouldn't be able to say, hey, it has 1 gig of RAM and it has a A6 dual-core processor that's 1.2 gigahertz. They don't tell you that on their website. So I'm not sure why they have to be so vague on especially the RAM and the RAM and the processor, but I don't know really why. Maybe it's because they have to hide something, I don't know. The Apple A6 is weak in my opinion compared to everything else out there. That's probably why they're hiding it on their website, and I think that's why I don't like the iPhone 5. The iPhone 5 has great benefits in my opinion, but it's too small for me, and it doesn't have all that software updates that Samsung provides. Software features that Samsung provides. And actually, the updates that Apple gives, after like 2 years, the updates that come out actually make your phone slower. But the problem with staying on the older versions of the operating system is that you're not going to be able to download the latest, newest apps, and iMessage. You might be left out on iMessage and FaceTime and all that Apple proprietary stuff. But on Samsung, or not Samsung, just any Android pretty much, they have no intention of slowing down your device. And some people say Android devices are so slow and laggy, but even on my phone, which is actually a Chinese hero phone, H9500 Plus, with a pretty antiquated processor, 1 gigahertz dual-core A9, I still get pretty solid performance on that operating system. So especially with this Exynos 5 Octa, or should I say Quad, which is 4 A15s and 4 A7s, it will be even smoother. And so, one thing I want to talk about is resolution on these devices. The Galaxy S4 has a 1080p display, 441 pixels per inch, and it's 5 inches. Now, most phones these days are coming up to 5 inches. For example, the new HTC M7, HTC One is 4.7, Sony Xperia Z is 5, Samsung Galaxy S4 is 5, Samsung Galaxy S3 is 4.7. So we're starting to get to 5, or just slightly lower than 5. But Apple is still at 4 and 4.0. And when I play with most people's phones, which aren't iPhones for some reason, I always find the iPhones to be too small. Of course, another reason why I like Samsung more, I already mentioned, is the software features. Apple doesn't really provide that much. iCloud was kind of a flop. It was just there to promote iOS 5, so people would upgrade to it. Samsung has features like Smart Stay and Smart Pause and all that stuff. And I'm not saying that's necessary or that it's always great. Sometimes it's not all that great, like S-Voice, for example, wasn't so good. But at least you have the right, to use or not use, especially with the disabling apps function. It's really useful on Android, and the Android modding community is just way more helpful. So I'm running out of time here, so we have to get into it. So the Apple iPhone 5 is another thing that I want to consider. Again, loving it is easy. That's why so many people do. I don't need the specs. I can just tell them to you. It has a 4-inch display, 1136 by 640 resolution, and that's 326 ppi. And the resolution is great, actually. Apple always gets the good screens, and I think resolution is really unnecessary. Most people don't even have that great of vision, so they can't experience the true greatness of the resolution. And even though I can tell the difference between a good quality display and a average quality display, like the one on my H9500 Plus, it's not necessary for me. Just by the fact that I can tell, but it doesn't bother me that I have a lower resolution of only 960 by 540 on my 5.3 inch phone. It doesn't bother me, even though most people would find it low resolution. So it's got the Exynos 5 Octa processor, which is a 1.6 gigahertz quad-core A15 and a 1.2 gigahertz quad-core A7. And along with 2 gigs of RAM, that should be really powerful on the benchmarkings like Quadrant and Antutu, etc. But it's a really powerful phone. It's got a 13 megapixel camera. All the specs are top notch, and the one reason why this stands out from the competition is its expandable storage. It's got the micro SD card slot, SDXC, up to 64 gigabytes. Apple doesn't have it. HTC doesn't have it. Google's Nexi, or Nexuses, don't have it. Xperia Z has it, except that Xperia has an antiquated quad-core A9. It's not that antiquated, really, but Sony just came in a little late, obviously, on that one, the Xperia Z. Not to say the Xperia Z is a bad phone, though. It's great and all. It's just slightly older with the Snapdragon S4 versus this A15 processors that are coming out. HTC's One specs are pretty much also top notch. It's got 2 gigs of RAM. It's got the 1080p display. That's pretty much this size. It's got the Snapdragon 600, which should be about on par with this Exynos 5 Octa. And it's a really great phone, even though most people are hating on the camera. Oh, it's only 4 megapixels. But really, it's still a great camera, even though it doesn't seem like that high megapixels. It's still a good camera. It's a great phone, but the only reason why the S3 comes on top is its software features, which you can disable. Just hit disable in the app settings if you don't like them, but I personally like them. And the main reason why I prefer the Galaxy S3 over the HTC One is expandable storage. Now design, I think I would hand it to the S4. I don't know, Samsung's designs always end up good in my opinion, although Apple's do come up good too. Apple's specs are significantly lower in comparison with this one. It's a 1.2 gigahertz dual core A6, and it only scores 1500 on Geekbench, which is like its only benchmarking method. And if you bench the Galaxy S3, it'll probably get like 2000, which is significantly higher than the iPhone 5, even though the iPhone 5 came out later. But the Galaxy S3, I think, is much better than the iPhone 5. It's bigger, but it feels nicer in my opinion. So, the Galaxy S4 is a great phone, but I think that they made one mistake. No. They did make one mistake, but I don't think that it has any effect on the quality of the phone whatsoever. It's just a little thing I wanted to point out. They announced during the keynote, if I can find a picture of it, when it said Samsung Galaxy S4 on the big screen, it looked like this. And it looks very strange. This part looks normal, except we get a 4 now. And we usually don't see Arabic numerals in the Samsung. The Galaxy S2 and S3 both had Roman numerals. And also the 4 seems to be a different color than the Galaxy part. And it's not the same size. So this might just be a mistake that they kept hush about. I just wanted to point out that I noticed that. Not that it has any negative effect to the phone, but I think it would have looked much nicer if we had the IV instead of the 4. Maybe the public doesn't know that V means 5, but I really doubt it. But that might be a reason why, and it might not be a mistake. But in my opinion, it just seems odd after we see 2 models with Roman numerals. This one's with Arabic numerals. The new TouchWiz. TouchWiz 5 was actually, I liked it, in my opinion. Much better and much smoother than TouchWiz 4 that came out on the Galaxy S2. TouchWiz 4 is just, I didn't like it. But now, this new version of TouchWiz, it's no longer inspired by nature, like the Galaxy S3. In a way, that's good, but I did miss the look and feel of the S3 on this one a little bit. Like, the lock screen is like Life Companion or something like that, which I'm not a great fan of. I did prefer the water lock screen of the S3 more, but I'm sure we can always customize it because it's Android. Since it's Android, it has a huge array of customizable lock screens and launchers and all that stuff. If you don't like the stock TouchWiz, it can always be modified, so that's not an issue. I don't think I will have time for Chinese phones right now, but in conclusion, the Galaxy S4 will stay on top, or at least for now it'll stay on top. Maybe next year we can see, I hope that HTC will come up on top this time, or Sony, because while I do like Samsung, it's just a bit annoying that they always end up on top all the time. We want to see a variety of best phones, but every year, pretty much all the other phones have to come out on the same time. The Xperia Z was just way too late. It pretty much beat the Galaxy S3 in terms of specs, but it was too late already. The Galaxy S4 and HTC One would come out very soon after, giving the Xperia Z not so much time to be the number 1. It was only the number 1 for a couple of months. And considering its launch date, the Galaxy S4 is the best phone on the market, or at least for now it is. Next year, maybe we might see HTC's new phone. Who knows what it will be called? They have such an odd naming system. HTC One, before it was One X, One S, One V, One XL, One VX. They ran out of letters, so it's just HTC One this time. So we'll see what it's going to be next year. I hope HTC will come up with a good phone next year. Not to say the HTC One wasn't bad, but the Galaxy S4, just because of that micro SD card slot, in my opinion, is better than the HTC One. And it's better than the Xperia Z because its specs are better, obviously. But the Xperia Z might be something to consider. It's waterproof, so it's slightly more durable than the Galaxy S4. And that might be another reason why the Xperia Z might be better than the Galaxy S4. Remember, it's not all about specs. If you have the Snapdragon S4, not to be confused with Galaxy S4, even though you only have that processor, but you have waterproof, I can kind of see why you would prefer the Xperia Z, just because it's more practical than having a supercomputer packed into a phone. If you spill some coffee on it, it won't suffer as much as, say, the Galaxy S4, or if you get it wet, or if you drop it in the toilet or something, there's higher chances of it surviving compared to the Galaxy S4. So that might be another reason. So I might think that Xperia Z might be number 1 on the list just because of that feature. But remember, there's much more to the phone than just technical specifications. But not to say that technical specifications are not important, but still there are other things to look at. and a phone. Galaxy S4 is great. It's the best. Bye-bye.